My name's Andrew Wheeler, photographer. Photographs motorcycle racing, here, there and everywhere, US, Europe, down under. Shooting for a little over 5 years. Prior to that I photographed horses, but now I focus on motorcycle racing. I'm a fan, I love motorcycle racing. I find it, from a visual aspect, stimulating. There's a lot of color, there's a lot of dynamic with the human form. The speed is obviously interesting. Location sometimes plays a big part in that, but in general it's just a thrilling sport that can tell a great story in a very simple way. I'm terrified of Rossi and in Phillip Island, that's one of my favourite racetracks in Australia. It's such a scenic track. It flows nicely. You can walk around it nicely. There's the ocean in the background when the weather's being pleasant. When it's not being pleasant, and it can change in next to a blink, and then you can get cold, trammed, wet, sunburnt. It's the only place in the world where you need to bring suntan lotion and a blanket and a raincoat all for one day. I'd say my other favourite racetrack, or other favourite event rather, would be when Hayden won at Laguna Seca, won the championship and everything. That was quite an event, because I think it was one of my first GPs, and it was just thrilling. I like to think that you can tell a story from. You know, you have to think that not everyone can get to a racetrack, and I like to think that whoever stumbles across my website, be they a rabid motorcycle racing fan or just someone that inadvertently comes across it, can get some idea of where it is, what it looks like, the characters involved, location. Sort of like you could almost smell being there, but I'd like to think that I could be someone's eyes who has never seen a motorcycle race. And for those that have seen motorcycle races, I like to think that they can see an event that they may not have been able to go to. You can see it in magazines such as Road Racer X, here in the US, Cycle World. I maintain a blog with Cycle World actually, and that's on cycleworld.com. Other magazines in the US, occasionally with use with manufacturers, Motorcycle Racer in the UK, other magazines such as Performance Bike, and then Australian Motorcycle News, and some I can't even remember. There's a Spanish magazine that slips my mind for now, but pretty much it's global. But I decided that nobody actually ever did anything like this. I was surprised, and the first year, actually it was the second year I was covering racing, I wondered if anybody put a book together. It's not a cheap publication, but it was like, I thought, well, without going into sort of being too racy or too sport racy, it was more a question of what happened that weekend and how does that tell a story. So this is what we did, what I did, and I put together this book that from every race that I cover in each season, with what I feel paints a picture for that particular weekend. A lot of it is not done consciously, it's just that I go through the images and find what attracts me and what I feel is representative of that weekend. So it could be your typical knee down shot, or it could just be someone looking tired and exhausted after they get off the bike after winning or just finishing the race. So and it could even be a kangaroo. For example, on the trip down to Australia, I opened that section of the book with a koala bear in a tree. So little things that represent that weekend to me that were important. A favourite shot. I would say probably recently. I would say there's a shot I have of Valentino Rossi laughing into a towel at Laguna Seca after he and Casey Stoner had a few words in park for me. That sums up Rossi in my view as not only one of the greatest riders, but just someone that lives life and enjoys what he does. And the look on his face was like, oh yeah, he just told me off. And he's like sniggering into his towel, and he's walking directly at me. So I would say that was one of my favourite shots. There's a helmet shot that I truly love. It was actually featured in Photoshop User magazine, and it's a picture of Eric Bostrom. Actually, the first race I attended at California Speedway, and when he was riding for Ducati, and he had his Red Bull helmet on, and he's just adjusting his visor, puts his hands over his face, and it kind of has there's a blown out guy in the background that's really blown out of focus, and he looks sort of like he's a spaceman, and there's this like weird thing behind him. So I would say those are my favorite shots, but there are probably others, but I'm just happy if something looks good. Shoot for yourself. Photograph what makes you happy. Some words of wisdom that were passed on to me, and I think when you try to shoot or try to shoot what people think you should shoot, then you're just going to end up being disappointed. And don't try to shoot everything that moves. Try to look around, see what's going on, and always think, how will somebody else see this? And so if you look at an image, or you look at a scene, and you think to yourself, always ask yourself your question, if I wasn't here, what would somebody see? In other words, if somebody opened a page and looked at this picture, how could that tell a story? And so that's I would say, look around, look up. Don't think you have to take a photograph of everything that happens. And even if you have to sit down on the ground sometimes, or sit on a wall and take a breather, and just watch and absorb, and then develop a thought or follow an idea, or give yourself an assignment over the weekend. I mean, if you're working for someone, you've got assignments, that's fine, but I still think it's important, even if you have assignments, you need to give yourself some time to play. Otherwise, you're going to become stale, and you're going to become bored, and I think your work will ultimately suffer. So you have to be able to regenerate and build an idea and keep yourself fresh as well. Get into the track my TomTom. That's my favorite piece of traveling equipment. I would say 2 lenses. I have a 15-30 Sigma lens, my only non-Canon lens, which allows me to create landscapes and tiny bike shots. I would also say, well, there's a 70-200. I like that as a zoom, and then I have a 300 f2.8 prime, which is a nice. It is a good lens. It does nice close shots. It also does nice portraits, headshots. You just move. Zoom lenses are fine, but with a prime lens, your best bet is to just move back and forth. It's like the old adage when you film, don't use zoom, you just move back and move forth to fill your frame. So those are the 3 things I feel are 4 things actually, if you count my TomTom. They're my useful pieces of equipment. I would just like to say that wherever I go, I miss my wife, Emily, terribly. And without her, I wouldn't be doing this, and I wouldn't be where I am without her love and support. And I enjoy the company of others that I meet every race weekend, and pretty much everybody that does this that I work with is cool, and I thank them. So.